Masechet Baba Batra, Daf Kof Non He. We begin with an interesting question. Itemar. Katan me'matay mocher benichse aviv. A minor. How old does he have to be before he can sell the property that he inherited from his father? How old does he have to be before he's considered responsible enough to do such a transaction? So a little background. If a young person makes money themselves, they do some tutoring or some babysitting, and they want to go and use that money and buy things and sell things, as long as it's a boy who's bar mitzvah 13 or a girl bat mitzvah 12 years old, they're considered responsible enough to do commercial transactions. By the way, when we say 12 and 13 years old, nowadays we just go by the date and then we make a nice big bar mitzvah party. But technically, halachically, it's not only the age, but also they need signs of 2 pubic hairs in order to be considered that they are bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. Good. That's regarding money that they make on their own and they want to buy and sell. However, the rabbis wanted to protect minors for inheritance that they got because they might be, 15 years old, 16 years old, and they inherit if their father dies. And now they inherit a $1 million field. And they're not really so responsible, and they may, we're afraid, squander that inheritance. They might go and say, we want to make a party, buy a lot of candy, and they may sell this field that's worth $1 million for $500,000, and then go and squander all that. So they're not yet considered so responsible in order to handle big affairs like their father's property. So this would be true to protect them. Also will protect the rest of the family if, let's say, there are other sons who are sharing in that inheritance, and then this son goes and sells it and squanders it away. So this would be problematic. So that's what we're asking now. What age would be considered that a kid is responsible enough, and that then they can sell? Under that age, their sale will not be considered a valid sale. So we see two opinions. Rava Amar Rav Nachman ben Shimone Esrei Shana, Rav Huna bar Chinena Amar Rav Nachman mi ben Esrim Shana. We have two opinions. Both are quoting Rav Nachman. So two different opinions within Rav Nachman. Rava says 18 years old, and Rav Huna bar Chinena says 20 years old. And incidentally, this means also that they grow 2 hairs. We're going to see that's going to be significant. Even if someone is 19, but they have not grown hairs yet, they're still considered a minor. Until when? The Gemara will discuss that also and show that once someone passes 20 years old, even if they have not grown hairs, they are considered an adult. So keep that in mind. Now, this line does not appear in many manuscripts. It says that the opinion of Rava, he never said this explicitly. It's not like he got up in a lecture and said, I think it's 18 years, but rather he only said it, we only derived it by inference from a story that happened. Now, usually when you have this line, then it immediately is followed by the story itself, and here there is no story that comes afterwards. And in fact, if we look in the manuscripts, we'll see that while this line does appear in printed editions and 2 or 3 manuscripts, it does not appear in the oldest and best manuscript, Baba Batra, which is this one here, is the Hamburg manuscript, although Hamburg currently is in Ashkenaz, but this is an old Sephardic 12th century manuscript that is very accurate, and so it doesn't have this line at all. This line is going to come up in a few minutes later on in the Sugya, where it does have a story, so it seems to have moved or been copied here for some reason, and even in the Vilna edition, it puts it in parentheses to say that this does not belong, and so we'll go to the next line. Mativ Rabbi Zera. Maaseh b'bnei berak bechad shemachar b'nichsei aviv umet uba'u b'nei mishpacha v'yid'aru lomar katan haya b'shat mita. So now we're going to quote the story that we saw yesterday. Rabbi Zera is quoting this as a challenge to one of these two opinions. It's a challenge to the opinion that says 20 years old. So let's review the story first. The following happened in Bnei Berak, where Rabbi Akiva lived, of someone who sold an inheritance that he got from his father, and this seller then died. And he was a young person. And so the family members came and they said, hey, our relative, let's say it was their brother, that sold this property, he was a minor. He was not authorized price to sell it, and therefore the sale is invalid, and give us the land back. And in fact, he was still a minor at the time that he died, not only at the time that he made the sale. And so so now the purchasers came and they asked Rabbi Akiva, says, listen, we hold that this person who sold it to us was an adult, and we want to check it. We'd like to exhume the body and check to see how old they were, and or to check if they had signs of puberty. Amar lehem, I atem reshaim lenavelo. Rebbe Akiva said, no, sorry, just for a monetary thing, you cannot disgrace a body like that. Ve'od simanin asuin lishtanot lachar mita. And furthermore, even if you did dig him up, it wouldn't help you because these physical signs change after death, and so whatever you find might not accurately reflect what the situation was when he was alive. And he said no. That's the end of the story. Now, we can understand this story according to Rava's opinion that says that the cutoff point is 18 years old. As long as someone is 18 years old, they can sell it. But that's only if they have 18 years old and they have 2 hairs. That it makes sense why they came and said, we want to check his body, because under 20 years old, a person is not considered an adult unless they have hairs. And so it makes sense. It makes a big difference, because even if the kid was 19 years old, the family can come and claim, yeah, he was 19, but he didn't develop hairs, and therefore the sale is invalid. So then the purchasers will say, well, let's dig him up and check. Well, let's see if there are hairs there. And so we can understand what they were looking for. It would make a difference whether he had 2 hairs or not. So we can understand the story according to Rava. But if you follow the other opinion that the cutoff time is 20 years old, then what are you checking for? We're about to see in the next Mishnah in Masechet Nida that once someone reaches 20 years old, then that's it. We assume that this person is an undeveloped adult, sexually undeveloped, but they're still considered an adult and they can do transactions and all things. And the fact that they don't have 2 hairs is just because this is a physical immaturity that they are not going to develop, but their mind has developed. Vehatenan ben asrim shelo hebi shete se'arot yabiu re'aya shehu ben asrim ve'hu asaris ve'lo choles ve'lo miyabem. We have Mishnah Masechet Nida that says someone who is 20 years old and he never developed 2 hairs, that all he has to do is bring a proof that he is 20 years old, and that's it. He's considered an adult for all matters, and he is the same as a saris. Saris is a eunuch, someone. It's an adult that has no genitals, and saris is considered an adult for business matters. He can do all those things. One thing he cannot do is chalitza or yibum. If someone dies without children and he has a brother who is a saris, then that brother does not do chalitza and not yibum. Why? Because yibum and chalitza are connected. You only do chalitza if you could do yibum, but because this person has no genitals or underdeveloped, and so therefore cannot do yibum, so since he cannot possibly do yibum, he also does not need to do chalitza, and the widow, she can just go and remarry without chalitza and yibum. Okay, the point for us is that once someone is 20 years old, it doesn't matter whether they have hairs or not. So if in fact the cutoff point is 20 years old, then all we need to know was this young adult under 20, in which case the sale is invalid, or over 20, which the purchasers hope he was over 20, and then the sale is valid. But if he's over 20, it doesn't matter whether he has 2 hairs or not. So why are they asking, can we check the body, right? It makes no difference what's on the body. And so we answer as follows: Lavit mad Allah amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak amar Rav vehu shenodu lo simane saris. Oh, we have an answer, because regarding that Mishnah, Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rav Yitzchak, said in the name of Rav that when do we consider someone an adult once they reach 20, even though they don't have 2 hairs? Only if they also do have other signs of being a sadis. There's a whole list of other signs. For example, that a person's voice is thin and never develops into a full voice, and other physical things that to look for. So if we see that, first of all, they're 20 years old and they have no hairs, and furthermore, they developed other things. We see other things that show that they're just generally sexually underdeveloped and are not going to develop. And so this is just their condition. But otherwise, they are considered an adult. And so there are things to check for to exhume the body and check to see if that person has these other signs. It would be in the interest of the purchasers to show, look, he has these other signs of non-development, and that shows that he is called an official saris, who is an adult for all matters, even without hairs. And so that is what they were checking for. So we have an answer to the question. Rava, interestingly, Rava, who was the one that said 18 years old, and this was a challenge to the opinion that said 20 years old against Rava, but nevertheless Rava is answering on behalf of the other opinion, so that's nice of Rava. And he says, actually, this reading makes even more sense, is in the wording of the Mishnah Nida, because it says, Vehu hasaris, so meaning we're reading it like this. If you have someone who's 20 years old and they don't have two hairs, if they have two hairs, then obviously they're an adult. But if they don't have two hairs and they reach 20 years old, then they have to bring a proof, number one, that they're 20 years old and that they are a saris, meaning that they also have other signs that they have not developed. And in that case, we consider that person to be an adult for business matters. But in fact, you do need that proof as well. And so this is actually a good reading of that Mishnah. Now we ask, now, not talking about this case, but in general, let's say a person never got two hairs, and now he reached 20, and he doesn't have two hairs, but he also doesn't have any of the other signs. He has a regular voice. All the other things are normal. And so now he's kind of in limbo. He's not considered an adult, not yet, because he doesn't have the signs of saris. So until when? Is this forever? At what point do we say, okay, he's for sure an adult, even though he doesn't have the signs of being officially a saris? Taneh Rabbi Chia adrov shenotav. It's a majority of their years. Now, no one knows how long they're going to live. So how do you count how many is a majority of their years? And the answer is, based on Tehillim, we say, Yemei shenotenu shib'im shana. A standard lifetime is 70 years, and therefore a majority of 70 years is 35 plus. So once a person passes their 35th year into the 36th year, then that's considered most of their years, and if they haven't developed anything yet, they're not going to develop anything, and therefore, it's not that they're not yet an adult, it's just that they have a condition that they're not going to develop sexually, but they are an adult for all other matters. And so once a person is like that, is 35 plus, and then they are considered an adult. Ki ata lekamed Rabbi Chia, ikechish amar lehu libre, ve'i libre ibre amar lehu lichchosh. Whenever a case like this would come to Rabbi Chia, if you have someone that already they're getting older, but they don't have hairs, and they're waiting for some signs to develop, so he would give them the following advice. If the person was skinny, he would say, go get fat. If the person was fat, he would tell them, go get skinny. Because a change in a person's weight might trigger other changes that would cause whatever hormones to go on that would then help them develop. Because signs of puberty sometimes will develop because someone is skinny or because they're fat, and so it could happen one way or another. So just change the body weight, and maybe that will cause a change, and then the person can be officially declared legally as an adult. Ibaya lehu. Toch zeman kilifnei zeman or kilachar zeman. And now a question specifically about that year itself. Let's say according to the opinion that says 18 years. So what about the 18th year? Is that like considered 17 or is it like someone considered 19? They counted their birthdays differently than we do. When we say someone is 18, it means they finished 18 years, they're already into their 19th year. But in olden days, they would count it differently. When a kid was born, baby was born, they're already considered one because they're within their first year. So that when we say they're 18, that's what we call 17 and a half. Okay, so that's the question. Let's say they are within their 18th year. They finished 17 years, but didn't yet finish 18 years. We call that 17 and a half. What is that? Do we count that like 16 or like 19? Or according to the other opinion, in their 20th years, like before, or is that like after? Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman, Toch zeman kilifnei zeman. Rava, Ba Rav Shela, Amar Rav Nachman, Toch zeman kilachar zeman. And again, two opinions, both quoting Rav Nachman. The first says that it's like they're all younger, and therefore, if they made a sale, it's invalid. Whereas Rabba, the son of Rav Shela, said in the name of Rav Nachman, it's like they're older, and therefore, if a 17-and-a-half-year-old made a sale, then it would be valid. And now we have the statement here, quoting Rava, and this statement of Rava that said it's like earlier. That a 17-and-a-half-year-old is not mature. He actually never said that explicitly, but we learned it from a story. Now here's the thing: whenever someone doesn't say something explicitly, but we infer it from a story, we always have to worry: was that the correct inference? It could be that we see something happen, and we think that the reason why someone did something was A, but really, if you ask them, they'll say, "No, you misunderstood. It was really B." So it's not easy to learn a halacha from a story, and that's what happened here. There was a certain person who was 17 and a half within the time period, not before the next birthday, and he went and sold a property of his father. And then the case came to Rava to see, is this a valid sale or not? Amar lehu lo asa velo kilum. And he said, no, it's nothing. Now, why do you say it's not a valid sale? Man dechazasa ba mishum toch zeman kilifnei zeman. The people witnessing that assume that it's because he was only 17 and a half, not yet a full 18 years. The 18th year was not completed. And so therefore, they derived from that must be Rava thinks that 17 and a half is like 16. Velahi hatam shetuta yeterta chazabe tavaka mishacharer lehu leabde. But actually, that wasn't the reason. They figured out afterwards that Rava saw that this young man, although he was already 18, but he was acting in an incompetent way. For example, he freed his slave. Now, why would you free your slave? It's not maybe he was anti-slavery, but more likely he was incompetent and he was just giving things away without proper compensation. So financially, even though morally it's a good thing to free your slave, financially it's not a good thing, and so therefore you see that he was not financially capable. Because Rava saw that, he said, okay, this person, whatever his age is not competent in doing financial things, and so therefore his sale is not a sale. That's why he did it. It was a separate reason. Now we learn another reason that it's up to the judge, the rabbi here, to look at the person and see whether they seem to be competent or not. And so that's why he said no, but in fact it was not because of his age, and it could very well be that he thinks that 17 and a half is sufficient as long as he is also generally competent in financial matters. שלח לגידל בר מנשיה לרבה, ילמדנו רבנו, תינוקת בת 14 שנה ויום אחד ויודעת בטיב משא ומתן, מהו? גידל, the son of Menashiah, sent a question to Rava. Says, can the master teach us? What about a young girl who's 14 years old? Tinoket, we say in modern Hebrew, tinok is a baby, but in Talmud it means just a young person. So you have a 14-year-old girl, 14 years on one day, and she knows how to buy and sell, right? She understands the value of money and negotiation. Can she buy and sell? We're talking about her own money she made from tutoring. Can she use that that money? Shelach le im yodat betiv masau matan mikacha mikach mimkara mimkar. And his answer was, as long as she is financially competent, yes, she can buy and sell, and something that she buys or sells is a valid sale. V'tishlach le tinok. Now we ask a question about the story. Why did Gidel ask about a girl? Why didn't he ask about a boy? Because that would be the same question regarding a boy who makes some money. Can he buy and sell things? And the answer is Maaseh Shaya, Kachaya. That was the story. Gidel wasn't asking a theoretical question. If you ask a theoretical question, then you could ask about a boy. But it was actually a particular case of a 14-year-old girl, and so that's why he asked about a girl. Why did he ask about a 14-year-old? Why not ask about a 12-year-old? Because that's the general cutoff for bat mitzvah. So why didn't he ask, and then we would know even for a 12-year-old? And the answer is Maaseh Shaya, Kachaya. It happened to be that she was 14. He was asking about a particular case, not asking in general what are all of the guidelines for how old a person can be. But in fact, if she was 12 in one day, it would be the same thing. And if it was a boy who was 13, it would also be the same thing. והדרבה לה בפירוש איתמר, אלא מקללה איתמר. תהו פחות מבין 20, דאזל זה בין נכסי אבוהו, כגידל בר מנשיה. אתה לקמא דרבה. Now, this statement of Rava, specifically the statement that we take into account someone's competence, we see, are they incompetent or competent, and we take that into consideration in addition to their actual age. This he did not say explicitly, but we inferred it from a story, from the following story, of someone who was under 20 years old. Maybe he was 19 and a half. And he went and sold some property that he inherited from his father, Gidel bar Menashe, following the ruling that Rava told Gidel bar Menashia. And then the case came before Rava. Amru le kirobe, zil echol tamre ushte be kashiata be Rava. Now the relatives of the boy who wanted to undo the sale, so they didn't want the sale to go through, so they wanted to show that let's say it was their brother, our brother is incompetent. And so they told him, go eat dates and throw the pits into Rava's house, which is a very unusual, strange action to do. You take dates, the date pits, you throw them in the garbage. You don't throw them into anybody's house, certainly not into the rabbi's house. So do this, and then Rava will be like, who's throwing these dates? And they'll see you outside and say, okay, there's something wrong with this kid. He is mentally incompetent. Avad hachi, and that's exactly what he did. Amar lehu zebineh lav zebineh. And Rava ruled his sale is not a valid sale. Although technically he was old enough, according to maybe he was 18, however you calculate that he was old enough, but he was not mentally competent. And so therefore, the ruse of the relatives worked. However, it's not over yet, because you still have to write up the decision. And so, when the Rava was writing up the decision, the buyers who wanted the sale to go through, they went to this boy who sold it to them and said, Zil emale Rava, Megillat Esther bezuza, shetara demor bezuza. They said, listen, Rava is going to charge you money to write the scroll. And you know what? You should haggle. And you should tell him to buy a whole Megillat Esther, which is a long scroll that you have to go and sit and write carefully. How much is a Megillat Esther? 1 zuz. Now you're writing a document that's just going to be 1 page long, and you're also charging me a zuz. You should haggle with Rava and try to get something off of the price. So now the buyers, they don't actually care if this boy saves money or not, but rather it's a ruse to show that this kid does know his business, has a good business sense, and he knows what he's doing if he's haggling with Rava. And that's what happens. Azal amar le. So the boy goes and tells Rava, who just adjudicated the case in his favor. He says, listen, you want to charge me a zuz? I could get a whole Megillat Esther for a zuz. I want to pay less. And then Rava says, I changed the verdict. Now the sale is a valid sale. Now the relatives told Rava, well, he didn't come up with that himself. He's not that smart. It's the buyers told him to say that. And so therefore you should should discount that. No, really, our younger brother is completely incompetent. Amar lehu masberi le sabar. Rava said, nevertheless, even if the buyers told him to say this, he understood it. He understood the logic of it. Since they explained it to him and he understood, that's sufficient to be mentally competent to do financial matters, and therefore the sale is final. And the fact that he took the dates and threw it into Rava's house is not because he was incompetent, it was because he was impudent. Right? What kind of do? He's littering, throwing things. He just has no respect. But that's a different story. But otherwise, he is mentally competent to make a business transaction, and therefore he declared the sale to be final. And this is a case where we learned this by an inference, but in this case, the inference was correct. In fact, Rava would take into account a person's mindset and judge whether, even if they were of age, he would say, well, yeah, but you act in a crazy way, so you're mentally incompetent. He would invalidate the sale. But if he saw a person was mentally competent, then he would say the sale is valid. Amar Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua Ul-Aidut, Aiduto, Aidut. Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua, says, even though we just said that a 15-year-old is not yet eligible to be able to sell land that he inherited from his father, he doesn't have 100% competence in order to do something serious like that. However, when it comes to testimony, he can testify. As long as a boy is 13 years old and more, he can be a valid witness. Amar Mozutra, lo maran ela lemetaltele, aval limkarke'e la. Mozutra says that's only true to be a witness regarding movable items, but when it comes to land, they cannot do so. So you see, he's connecting the ability to sell with the ability to testify. If someone is 20 years old, they can sell land, so they can testify about land as well. If someone is 15 years old, they can only sell movable items, not land that they inherited, and therefore they can only testify about movable items. So these two go together, which makes some sense if they're have mental capacity enough to be careful, to be responsible for a movable item, then they can testify about a movable item. Amar le Rav Asher leMozutra, ma'ishena metaltele dezbine zibine. And so now Rav Asher challenges Mozutra. He says, what's the difference between a movable item and land, or that a 15-year-old can testify about a movable item? Oh, because he can sell a movable item. So whatever he can sell, he can also testify about. Well, I challenge that. We have a Mishnah in Masechet Gitin that says young children, 8-year-old, if he sells something, it's a valid sale. If he buys something, it's a valid purchase. Right? Whatever he buys is a valid purchase. Whatever he sells is a valid sale. So if an 8-year-old has a lemonade stand and is selling cookies and toys and lemonade, all those are valid sales. The guy can't come back and say, I want my money back. And so, since an 8-year-old is responsible enough to sell movable items, would you say also, because you just connected them, that an 8-year-old also can testify about movable items? Because that's what it seems from your equation of ability to sell and ability to testify. And he says, no. Regarding testimony, there's an additional requirement that the pasuk says the two men will stand. So they have to be called men in some sense, and so it has to be a boy at least 13 years old and more to be called a man, and only then can he testify about anything. Okay, once he's 13, now we say, oh, you can buy and sell movable items, you can testify about that, and then when you get older and you can sell even land, then you'll be able to testify about land. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.